Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing, and the senior living industry.
And I'm Corrie Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, is there such thing as a good divorce? We're going to be talking about this difficult topic for many families, but we've got a wonderful psychologist that could shed some light on this topic. But first, Corrie, I want to extend my sincere condolences to you, your husband, Andy, and the Frankel family on the recent passing of your father-in-law, who I know you just adored.
Thank you so much, Matt. I have to tell you, he was an incredible man. And, there's an expression, I think it's Winston Churchill said, you make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. Nobody gave more than this man. So I am going to miss you, Ruby Frankel, desperately. And I am so grateful for having known you.
Yeah, you always spoke so fondly of him and the family. And again, condolences to you and Andy and the family. What do we have coming up on the second half, Corrie?
On the second half of the show, we're going to be talking to notary Nadia Dirigi. She's going to be helping us get our legal documents in order. And that should be very interesting, especially after the announcement I just made. So that's coming up after the 3:30 news.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Important conversations for families. I always hear, I've got a power of attorney, I'm good to go. Or I've got a will, I'm good to go. Nadia is really going to be opening up our eyes. And you don't want to be missing that. That's after 3:30 news.
So now we're going to start with the first half. Jodi Zentner is a psychologist in private practice. She's been doing this work for over 30 years, although you'd never know this by looking at her. She's worked in a hospital and school settings. She specializes in adolescent, adult, family, all sorts of relationships, anxiety, depression, and ADHD. We've had her on the show before, and we're thrilled to have her back. Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed, Jodi.
Thank you, Corrie. I'm happy to be back here.
So we're going to start off with not an easy question, a short question, but not such an easy one. Why do, in your opinion or in your experience, why do couples divorce?
Well, I think it's a loaded question because I think you could also ask, why do people marry, right?
Fair.
I think for the same reasons that the multitude of reasons that people marry, I think that there's a multitude of reasons that people divorce. And I guess the tone of divorce can be different and vary as well. So first we can have the difficult divorce, those that will be surprised, those that will find out that there's infidelity or even issues of, surprises financially, separate accounts, separate families, all kinds of issues like that will bring about a lot of animosity, a lot of difficulty. So those are one kind of endings to a marriage. And then the other ones are just ones that may just fade away. Over time, they wind up being roommates. They wind up just living together as friends. They're not really interacting. They're leading separate lives. And perhaps they just decide that they'd be best separated and going their separate ways.
Now, Jodi, I'm always intrigued. We know people that we say, geez, how is that marriage lasting? And they just continue forever. And then we get shocked by hearing about a couple's divorce. And that came out of nowhere. And I think couples do talk about it sometimes, but is there a good time and when? How would someone know it's the right time to end a marriage?
Well, the first thing I would say is you never know what's going on behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. So what you perceive in public, you don't really know what's happening. So I would never assume to understand what a marriage or what a relationship is just based on what I'm seeing outside of the home. And in terms of your question of when to know, what I have said to my clients, because they do come and they're often ambivalent. There's a lot of ambivalence around that decision. How do you know? And I will say that you never really know 100%. And I'll go back to knowing when to be married. And are you ever 100% sure that this is the partner that you are choosing supposedly to spend the rest of your life with? So I'll say that it's not something that you're just going to wake up one day and just say, I'm absolutely certain that I want to end my marriage and I'm not going to regret it. I'm not going to look back. And you're still going to feel some ambivalence about it.
That's the voice of Jodi Zentner. She is a psychologist, and she is talking about navigating the whole issue of divorce. I know this is a huge issue, and we're trying to squeeze it into one half of a show, but if we can offer some tidbits of information, this is why we came to you, Jodi. So I hear sometimes the term trial separation being thrown around, and I'm not even entirely sure whether it's trial separation or living apart. I'm curious what your view is on the whole concept of trial separation.
Well, I guess it would depend on the couple as well. Again, what does that look like, a separation? People can often be separated while they're living in the same home. So, there's emotional separation. And I'm sure we all know, or we've heard of couples that really they're living together, but they're really separated. And then there's those, and I think, Corrie, what you're referring to are couples that may decide, okay, let me move out. Let's see what this feels like and decide if this is what we want. I don't know if that happens as often as we think should or could, but I'm not so sure that that's necessarily the way to go. People have been having difficulties for many more years before that actually is being discussed. So I don't know what a trial separation really means, because I think emotionally people have been separating long before the topic comes up between the couple.
Yeah, I would agree, Jodi. It's you hear it, and you have to question it, because, like you say, the odds are things have been festering for not short term, but probably a long term. And in fact, there could even be, like you say, trial separations within the house itself. And you talk to couples, and maybe there's differing views from the couples themselves, one more so than the other, and they actually go through with the divorce. And you hear sometimes that, yes, it is very difficult, and it's almost like a grieving process for some. So do you see that? Would you consider divorce almost, is it normal to grieve post-divorce?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to that in just a second. I do want to just say, prior to getting to the actual divorce, because we talked about separation, is right. I really feel, because it's important for me to bring this up, that couples stay away from counseling, from marital counseling, because they feel that they're only going to therapy to fix the marriage. And I want to take a minute to say that it's important to consider counseling just to even consider the viability of the relationship. And even if you explore that relationship is not meant to be, you will often end it in a healthier way through counseling than you may do so without the intervention. So
I love Jodi, I just want to say that I love that you brought this up. Please continue to expand on it, because I think it's so important.
I just wanted to, I thought it was an important point.
Yes.
That, because, so many times couples are afraid to go to counseling when they're having marital difficulties, because the goal should only be to fix it. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's worth it. And I really want to tell your audience, please, if there are people that are having some difficulties in their marriage, please consider counseling, not because the goal is to fix it, but because you want to explore what's going on in the relationship and to see what avenues you want to pursue. I just wanted to say that. I really think it's important.
Yeah, it really is, Jodi. And I think you also bring up a very important point. And we're talking with Jodi Zentner, psychologist, and talking about navigating divorce. And you mentioned something very important, that some may be even afraid to get counseling or mediation or more of a discovery. And the odds are it's probably one more so than the other. Probably one willing partner and one not so willing partner. So how, I'd like to expand on that for those that might be considering it, but just, you know what, I don't want to do this. It's difficult on the other partner when there's resistance.
Well, I mean, I think that if you can't go as a couple, then you should go alone.
Okay.
It's that simple. And basically, when I do have an individual in front of me who's coming themselves because they're having marital difficulties, I'll really encourage them to really make the effort to go as a couple And if they won't, basically I say, if there's no intervention, if there's nothing being done to fix it, nothing's going to change.
Right.
And
Nothing
really
changes if nothing changes.
Right.
Right.
So obviously, and also another important point is you cannot fix a relationship by yourself. One person cannot do the work for two.
Fair enough. It takes two people to have a fight, two people to argue, two people to communicate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Could you just touch again then, thank you for that, on the is it normal to grieve a divorce?
Yes, of course. So definitely it is a loss. Corrie, it's an important question related. It is a loss like any other loss. And what will often happen is the individual will wonder if this is something I want. Like this is what often happen with my sessions is they'll come to me not understanding why it is they're sad when it's the end of their relationship that they actually want. And it's because it's the loss of something they had hoped for when they first got married. This dream or this vision of an intact family and growing old together is suddenly no longer present. So therefore, it's mourning the loss of that vision. So it's very real, absolutely. And you do have to go through that to be able to come out the other side and continue.
Talking with Jodi Zentner, psychologist, and we're trying to navigate divorce. It's a very challenging subject, but great advice, Jodi. And we have to head out to traffic, but when we come back, Jodi, we're going to start addressing the children. And this is always sensitive. How do we talk to them? Is the timing right? When is the timing? So we're going to ask you a couple of questions related to the kids. But first, let's head out to the CJAD Traffic Center and hear from Jill Fitzgerald.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota, along with my co-host Matt Delvecchio, and we are talking to psychologist Jodi Zentner. She's really helping us navigate some important issues around the topic of divorce. So, Jodi, when should parents tell their children they're separating?
Well, I think it's important to consider the ages of the children that you're talking about. So, if you're talking about older children, pre-adolescents and older adolescents, they're going to know what's going on before you're actually officially having the conversation. So, basically, more transparency is better the older they are. Younger kids will feel something, but they won't necessarily be clued into the fact that there's a separation coming up and one parent is about to move out. So if we're going to talk about a more structured approach with younger kids, that's what I'll be more specifically talking about right now. First, I think both parents need to plan what they're going to say. Both parents need to talk to the children together. Definitely a non-blaming narrative. And when you talk to the kids why this is happening, again, it's about the non-blaming. It's about telling them that it's not about them, absolutely. And also really be specific about what's going to change, what's going to stay the same, which parent is going to stay home, at least for the time being. Perhaps one will eventually sell the house, but usually one moves out and one stays. Reassurance is really, really important. And whatever reaction your children are having is normal. There's nothing that is not normal, whether they're neutral and they do say nothing, whether they cry, whether they run away. It's all appropriate. Every child will respond differently. Definitely ask for questions, but don't pressure them. And obviously give them time to adjust to the news.
Talking with Jodi Zentner about navigating divorce. Some wonderful words of advice. They're never easy, especially when it comes to the kids, Jodi. And I'd love to get your take on shared custody. And that's one. It's always difficult just to bring the news to the kids. How do I do it? You brought up some very good points on how to do it. But now there's the topic of shared custody, and there are differing views on that. Is there such thing as a winning formula, Jodi? What would you suggest?
Well, the winning formula is when parents are co-parenting well. So whatever that's going to look like, if the parents are going to, and there are situations where parents will co-parent well. So whatever it is, if it's one, in terms of the time spent with each other, It's good communication. So that's always the winner. In terms of how it looks, the number of hours, whether it's 1 week on, 1 week off, 2, 3. I mean, there's all different designs. To me, the most consistency, the structure, the communication between the parents, that's going to work the best. I personally like, and I think it's rare, but it's ideal for the children, is that the children stay in the home and the parents go in and out of the home. And occasionally that happens. And if we consider what's best for the child, that's probably what's best for the child.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, because I think that, I mean, I would hope that parents don't stay together. I don't know. I'm not going to say I would hope they don't stay together just for the children, but I suppose a big concern.
Occasionally, right?
Right. Okay. And that's a choice. But I wonder, does divorce or staying together when you shouldn't be together negatively impact the kids?
There's definitely research that supports that. I mean, some would say you just have to measure the cortisol levels, the stress hormone in the child, to take a look how it impacts them. Why wouldn't it? I mean, children aren't in a vacuum. It really is, I almost want to say, a philosophical question in terms of what's better, a dysfunctional intact family or a healthy divorced family, or, there's, so how do we look at that? But I would say that what, message are we giving children about relationships and role models about relationships if their parents are not having a healthy one and not offering the role model of a healthy one to their children?
But I would agree with that. Because I had heard long time ago, probably at this point, that it's not divorce that affects the children negatively, but what they witness prior to in a dysfunctional, no love or loveless marriage. Does that make sense?
Well, healthy parenting is healthy. So if you look at healthy parenting, right? Healthy parenting is healthy parenting, whether you're divorced or you're intact. Right. Why don't we just look at it that way?
Yeah,
true.
So true is right. The psychologist Jodi Zentner offering some great words of advice on this challenging and sensitive subject of divorce. And you mentioned something, Jodi, about co-parenting well, which is the winning formula. And I think it's so true. And part of this post-divorce is the way parents are communicating with each other. And we've all heard, those nightmare stories where, they're communicating through the kids and influencing the children. But what words of advice can you give for parents to communicate to each other post-divorce?
I think that what tends to happen is the children are forgotten, and it becomes about the parents in terms of what their needs are. And I don't think it's done on purpose. I think that it just gets lost in the emotional process. But I wonder if we really focused on what's best for the child in terms of the divorce process, if all of it was really about what their needs were and not what the parents' needs were, I think that the decision-making would turn out to be a little bit different.
It's a wonderful reframe that you're putting out there, and I hope that people are listening and can take and heed those words of advice, because I think that is a tremendous key to successful, if we can call it a good divorce. I'm going to switch gears just a tiny bit, because I'm wondering how here we are living in this pandemic, and I kind of was curious what your thoughts are on the impact of COVID on couples and the incidence of divorce.
I don't think there's any research yet, although I think it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of the past couple of years. But my educated guess would be, in some way, some couples may have strengthened their relationship by being closer and together, perhaps because the opportunity wasn't there prior to lockdowns and the pandemic. And of course, I think that on the other side of the coin, some couples realized that it is time for us to separate and end our marriage. And I think that is happening more than we'd like it to, but yes, I did think it pushed people over the edge to end their relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Jodi. And I would also add, when we were in the middle, in the heat of the pandemic, there wasn't much place, nowhere to go, and we heard a lot of couples having a difficult time. Now, as we are in the tail end of this, I'm hearing from some couples that, you know what, we got through this, and it got a little ugly in the past year and a half, but now we're seeing the light, and you are right. I think it has made some couples stronger, and they're able to say, okay, we got through this, and we're really going to look back 5-10 years from now. We're all going to look back, and not many of us have, in our generation, have had to go through something like this. So, Jodi, we want to thank you so much for joining us here on Life Unrehearsed. Such wonderful words of advice. How could people get to know you, get to see you for those words of advice?
Best way is by email. It's Jodi Zentner at gmail.com, JODIZENTNER at gmail.com. And I also have a website, JodiZentner.com, www.JodiZentner.com. That would be the best way to find me.
All right. Thank you so much, Jodi. It's Jodi Zentner, psychologist, helping us navigate through divorce. All right, Corrie, what do we have coming up on the second half?
Coming up, notary Nadia Derici. She's going to help us get our legal documents in order. That's coming up after the 3:30 CTV News Update.